Hello BookTube, this is the Intellectual Reads and my name is Dennis, and today I would like to review a book that I recently read, which is The King, Queen, Knave, a novel written by Vladimir Nabokov rather early in his career. I believe this was the second book published by him. It was written in Russian, and then later in his life, much later in fact, when he was working on his last work, he undertook to translate this and edit it in the English language to give it a new life. The book takes place in Germany. It was an idea of his that developed on a trip to Germany that he took from Russia. I believe it took him, after the spark of the idea, about a year to write it, edit, and publish it. If you are familiar with Lolita and that plot line, this one is a little outrageous as well. The plot line of the book follows Franz, who is a 19-year-old young man, as he embarks on a journey from a rural village to the metropolis. His mother has coordinated with his uncle that Franz would visit him, and his uncle, being a wealthy tycoon who owns a rather large men's fashion department store and is of the world, would sort of take him under his wing, teach him the tricks of the trade, so to speak, and make a man out of him. The first scene of the story very uniquely takes place in a train wagon as Franz is traveling to Berlin, where he ends up in the same wagon as his uncle and the uncle's wife, who is his aunt. It's a very interesting scene because it shows the class difference of the two people as Franz makes his way to kind of the second class wagon, and you also realize the interactions and the fact that the uncle is very looking forward to seeing Franz and nurturing him, as he does not have his own children, and the wife is very against this. As Franz makes his journey to Berlin, gets settled, and eventually makes his way into their home, the interactions start to change. His aunt rather takes a very big liking to him, and a romance blooms. And we follow this romance as it leads to fascination, lust, and all the different things, also deception behind the uncle's back. And it is also a sort of taboo romance, and we see in the first part of the novel the sort of eloquent writing of Nabokov as he justifies it through great character development. In essence, turning the first part of the novel into a romance. The book quickly changes tone here, and the second part of the book I would describe more as a suspense, a thriller, as both parties, Franz and his aunt included, try to devise a plot to get rid of his uncle. It is not easy to do because the plot has to look natural, since the uncle's money and his will is at stake, and nobody wants to live in the slummy apartment that Franz currently resides in as this story takes place. And under the great wordsman's guidance, Nabokov here kind of merges the line between comedy and tragedy. What I enjoyed about this book mostly is how well it brought back memories to me of reading Lolita and being invigorated by the style and the eloquence of Nabokov's writing. And I think that I had withheld from reading more of him because his other fictions aren't really discussed. As is usually with any classical authors, we would point out 2 or 3 books of theirs. Nabokov sort of has this reputation of just writing Lolita. And while everybody talks about Lolita, while it's taught in all top universities, I think that people don't realize just how many great books and what a prolific author Nabokov was. I can't speak to their greatness because this is only the second book that I picked up. But I can most definitely tell you that this book did not disappoint me. And in the back here, even Nabokov himself says that of all my novels, this Bright Brood is the gayest. I would agree with this sentiment because the only word I can describe this book in, if I had to use one, would be a romp. This book was so entertaining and it holds your attention the whole way through. It has great insights into human nature, as well as utilizing many aspects of different genre writing. In that essence, it kind of reminded me of reading Shakespeare. In the way that Shakespeare would have plot lines that wouldn't bog you down into a certain genre, but there was a scene that would be comedic, followed by a tragic scene. There would definitely be a few romantic scenes here and there. And so Nabokov, being able to utilize all different aspects of different genres that make them great, here in this novel very much reminded me of reading a Shakespeare work. In the introduction that I read here, he often says that this book had other people mention to him that it reminded them of Madame Bovary or Balzac novels. So if you're into Shakespeare or you're into Balzac or Flaubert, I would definitely recommend this work, which is The King, Queen, and Knave. I was very surprised also that it wasn't difficult at all to get through. This is one of his earlier works, and maybe that is why. But the suspense, the way it caught my attention, and I didn't want to put it down at times. This was a rather quick read for me. So I would say that if you read Lolita and you haven't read any other of his works but appreciate Lolita, you're definitely doing a disservice by not going and researching more of his works. I would also say that if you found Lolita very challenging, perhaps give this a try. Also, I would say, because it is a love affair between Franz, a younger man, and his aunt, I think it gives very perceptive and a new angle on family relationships and how things can be viewed from a perspective that is tabooed. In the end, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars because I thought some of the actions here were rather naive by the characters, very predictable, and sort of made me roll my eyes. And I would attribute this to the fact that at the time of writing this book, Nabokov was still earning his chops. I don't think it detracts from the enjoyment of the book in any way, because most of those things happen as the relationships start to form. I think this book only gets better as it progresses. Finally, I will say that I'm very glad to return to an author that I haven't revisited in 10 years. And the reason for that is that I picked this book up about 6 months ago. I picked up a few other of his books, which I will show. I picked up The Invitation to a Beheading, as well as The Gift. And the reason I picked these books up was that they were $10, and it was a great excuse to return to an author who I had not read for a while, and they kind of look very nice together. So, so if you read either The Gift or An Invitation to the Beheading, or you have another novel besides Lolita that you would recommend, I would love to hear it in the conversational box down below, as well as if you have your own opinions on The King, Queen, and Knave, or any other works you may want to discuss or recommend from Nabokov's lifetime. I would certainly be happy to join you in a great discussion. The last thing I will mention is that I also picked up The Insomniac Dreams. is the completed edited with commentary by Gennady Barbertolo, and this is Experiments with Time by Vladimir Nabokov. And I believe Vladimir Nabokov had a peculiar interest of waking up from a dream and recording it on note cards, and this book supposedly goes into all these recordings, photocopying the note cards themselves, which I'm also excited to get into. But this is more of a like non-fiction book that I think I would want to read over a long time rather than devour it in one shot, so it can stay on the back burner for a while. Again, I hope everybody has a great new year. I'm very glad that you guys have joined me as I make my return here, and all the best wishes in 2020, and enjoy your upcoming year.